Hi guys, welcome to Devs Only Sports. This is episode 37. Before we get into anything, make sure to follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. Also, watch the full episodes on YouTube and Spotify. It's been a minute. I'll be honest. It has been a while since we have recorded an episode, sat down, and actually spoke to you guys. If you followed us on Instagram or on TikTok, you know that we're dishing out content every single day. But we have school. I mean, that's it. So we got that all out of the way. Now we're back. We were never really gone, but we're here recording the episodes. Big thing right now we're going to be getting into is the MLB trade deadline. And let me just start it off by saying this was probably one of the worst trade deadlines I have ever witnessed, been a part of, whatever you want to call it. It was just brutal. And the thing that really pissed me off the most about all of it were all of these teams just signing the players that they got rid of in the first place because they needed to get rid of them in order to expand on the team that they had. So it's everyone just counter arguing each other as if like it's making a big difference. I mean, you look at the Dodgers, you look at the Astros, funnily enough, the two teams that are constantly getting brought up and constantly have beef with one another are now just signing the players that they got rid of a couple of years ago. Because, I mean, in the Dodgers case, it's not even like they need them. And in the Astros case, like, yes, it makes sense, but I think you got teams like the Rangers signing big, but yeah, I mean, what are your initial thoughts on the MLB trade deadline from 2023?
No, the trade deadline this year is kind of ass. I'm not even gonna lie. Like nothing actually that was that impactful happened. Everyone's gonna hype up Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander, but like it's one starting pitcher. And this year it's kind of weird because like last year you look at it and the Astros and Dodgers both won over 106 games. They would just were by far the best teams in baseball the entire year. But like this year, like there's like 10 teams that could easily win the World Series, and like it doesn't really matter this in particular this year. It doesn't really matter where teams are seated because the playing field is pretty level. There's a lot of teams that are good, but no team that's like really stands out. I mean, everyone's hyping up the Braves right now because they have the best record in baseball, but
Yeah.
I don't think anyone's too scared of the Braves. I mean, they're a good team. They won the World Series, but just like every other team in the playoffs in the last few years, like they had one World Series run, and then the rest of the time they were a disappointment. Last year they lost to the Phillies in the first round, and a few years ago they lost to the Cardinals. Like it just depends in baseball. It's a different kind of sport. It's not the NBA. It's not the NFL. But I find it really funny, but like what you're saying, that teams just getting their guys back. I mean, the Dodgers get back Joe Kelly, Kike Hernandez. The Astros get back Justin Verlander. Just the Justin Verlander move, that makes sense. They should have never let him go. And it didn't make sense that he signed with the Mets in the first place. Now it makes sense that he's back with the Astros. People hyping it up as if like the Astros are like the only team that can win the World Series now. That's a little too much. But the Astros are probably still the favorite in the American League right now just because of their playoff experience. But it's a very level playing field. But I just find it funny that like the best part about the trade deadline every year is that people make it seem like the trade deadline is the World Series. Like the trade deadline
Hmm.
has such a minuscule impact on actual teams. It's like it's not even it doesn't even make sense why people care about it this much. It just because yes, you get good players, you get hyped about it, but like it doesn't actually make that big of a difference. Like when we look at it, the Astros last year won the World Series. Did they get anyone that impactful at the trade deadline? No. Like the Braves, the Dodgers when they won, like the trade deadline is not that important. I mean, the Dodgers have gotten like Manny Machado, Yu Darvish, all these guys at the trade deadline, and all those years they never won the World Series. So it's not that big of a deal. It's
Hmm.
just yes, it looks good on paper, but you don't win on paper. We've seen that with the Mets, we've seen that with the Yankees, we've seen that with the Padres. I mean, all these great teams with the biggest payrolls. I think I saw some graphic that the top four teams in payroll are not in the playoff picture right now. So I think it just shows
Hmm.
again that money does not buy you championships.
That's what
But
I'm saying.
it's just the trade deadline is overhyped every year. This year is no different. But I just think that like we could go move by move. We could see like which ones have the most impact. But in my opinion, I think the Verlander move has the most impact just because he was on the team last year. He's been on he won two World Series with the Astros in the last like 5, 6 years. Now he goes back to his basically his home team. And that should be a good fit for them. They've had a lot of good pitchers in their rotation, but they're all young and like they haven't performed as good this year as they did last year. So I think that
Hmm.
just having him at the beginning of the rotation will help them. Is it going to be a total game changer? No, but he it's definitely a big help for them. And I think they're probably the favorites to win the American League. But again,
Hmm.
it's not the same as like other years. It's like all the teams are pretty close.
Hmm.
But I find the things that I also found funny were like the team that I found the like just that had the absolutely most embarrassing season on all fronts is the Mets. Like we want to talk about the Padres because the Padres are having a bad year, but they're still kind of in contention. But the Mets, what the Mets have done in the past 2 years is actually hilarious. Okay. So last year, like a few years ago, Steve Cohen comes in. Everyone's hyping up the Mets. They're going to be the next Dodgers, spend all this money and just be perennial World Series contenders, right?
Yep.
And they had one good season last year where DeGrom and Scherzer stayed relatively healthy. They made it to the postseason and they lost to the Padres in the wild card round after winning 101 games in the regular season. Okay. This
Yep.
offseason, they lose Jacob DeGrom, which actually turns out to be a relatively smart thing to do because he got hurt this year. He's a great pitcher. He's the best pitcher in baseball, but he's very injury prone. So, okay, fine. You didn't pay him the money. But then you sign Justin Verlander in his replace him. But this year, I just made a video about this, but like this team has just plummeted, bro. Every one of their star players has gone to shit. I mean, Francisco Lindor, Pete Alonso, Brandon Nimmo, Max Scherzer, Justin Verlander, all of them are having significantly worse years than they did last year. And
Hmm.
the thing that I find hilarious is that they were ascending. Like this team didn't make the playoffs. Like 5 years ago, they weren't in the playoff picture. Then they've steadily
Yeah.
gotten better. They're in the playoff picture. This year was supposed to be their year. They were the World Series favorites heading into the year, like one of them, right?
Yeah.
And they just had a bad 100 games, and then their front office is like, yeah, we can't compete anymore. Trade Scherzer, trades Robertson, trades Verlander today. I'm like, guys, 3 months ago, you guys thought you guys were going to win the World Series, and now it suddenly changed. Like
Hmm.
I feel like teams need to be a little more stick with it a little more. I mean, I know that
Yeah.
Verlander and Scherzer are old, but like to tell me that the Mets thought that they were like the best team in baseball 5 months ago, and now that they've had a bad 100 game stretch, that they can't compete for another 3 years. People, Scherzer and Verlander came out saying that the front office told them that they're basically trying to compete in 2025 and 2026 and just hold it off.
Hmm.
Like I feel like it's a kind of a quick trigger. I know it's New York. I know that they think that they're going to win everything. They haven't won anything in a while. Since 1986, they haven't won anything. So the whole Mets fan base is just a total joke. It's actually hilarious what's happened, but I think it's good for the Rangers and the Astros. I think the Rangers have done a good job this year. Do I think that they're World Series contenders? Absolutely not. Their pitching staff is not deep enough. I know that they added Montgomery and Scherzer, but just their overall rotation still needs to grow a little bit. I like
Hmm.
their lineup a lot. Their lineup is probably the best lineup in baseball just by scoring runs. They have the best scoring offense in baseball. So they'll be dangerous, but I don't think they're true contenders. The Astros, on the other hand, slightly better pitching staff. They're contenders, but I just find the Mets being hilarious. And then we could get to the Padres. But like the thing that was the best part about the Padres, right,
Hmm.
is that all these analysts were like, oh, the Padres are going to sell at the deadline. And I'm like, guys, the Padres are absolutely not going to sell at the deadline. I don't care if the
Yeah.
Padres didn't win a game. This team can't sell at the deadline. They're all in. They're all
Hmm.
in. They can't go. You can't leave when you're all in. And it's like saying like you can't do that. You can't do that. They are all in right now. They paid all their players. They just signed Xander Bogaerts. They have Manny Machado, Juan Soto, Blake Snell, Fernando Tatis. They have the best roster in baseball, and it's not even close. They're not gonna just because they're 51 and 54, just a few games under 500. They're not gonna just sell. They're not gonna just like
Yeah.
pack it in. Like they still believe that they can make the playoffs. They still believe that they're gonna win the World Series. And if they
Yep.
make the playoffs, they're a dangerous team. As we discussed earlier, the National League is not that strong this year. They can make a
Yeah.
run. So I feel like all these analysts that are going crazy, like, oh, the Padres are gonna sell, they're not gonna sell. Why would they sell? They like what are they gonna do? Let's say they do sell. Let's say they trade Hader and they didn't, but let's say they traded Snell and Hader and they got some prospects or they retooled a little bit. They still want to compete next year because they have Machado and Soto and Bogart. They have all these guys under contract. They have to go for it now. They don't really have
Hmm.
time to just have a whole rebuild like the Mets think that they're going to do. I just find what the Mets and Padres have done is just actually like so embarrassing for them. They need some better manager,
Yeah.
like general managers, because they do not know what they're doing. I mean, the Padres didn't screw it up, but the Mets are the dumbest franchise, bro. That was embarrassing.
Yeah, I feel like I always look back to like when they were in spring training in the off season and they're like practicing their like World
Eh,
Series celebrations. And I'm like, why do that though? And not only why do that, but why have someone record that and then think, oh, you know what would be a good idea? Let's make everyone else in the league mad by posting it and letting them see it as if they were going to go anywhere near a World Series like anytime soon. So yeah, like you're right, especially with, teams like the Mets and the Padres, like they're the reason why this like trade deadline has been so bad this year. And I feel like it's not even like just the teams either. Like a bunch of these analysts coming up with some of the most outlandish trades for players like Shohei Ohtani, for players like Juan Soto, and then again you have Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander that, there are all these trade speculations. The amount of jerseys I've seen Shohei Ohtani in on Instagram recently has been absolutely ridiculous. I've seen him in a
every
Dodgers
team,
uniform.
every
I've seen him
team.
in a Reds uniform. I've seen him in an Athletics uniform. I simply don't understand what it takes for people to realize that A, Shohei Ohtani isn't going to leave the Angels in the middle of the season because he's way too loyal. Like that's just his personality as it is. And he genuinely thinks that the Angels are going to go far. And you look at the AL West right now, the Mariners are messing up and they can't get control of anything. They can't get control of their bullpen, their rotation, their offense has been lacking since the beginning of the season. And now they are just a dud. The only team that they're above, of course, is going to be the Athletics, but even the Athletics are catching up to them. So now we're looking at a three-team division consistent of the Rangers and the Astros. The Rangers, which are a team that are bound to malfunction at any point now, because all it takes is one DeGrom injury. Now you've got Verlander that could potentially be an injury
Scherzer,
as well.
Scherzer.
Scherzer that can be an injury as well. And like get rid of those guys. Now you're paying these guys to sit on your IL, which obviously isn't good. You had Corey Seager, which was on the IL not so long ago, and you know that he's tender from that because when he was on the Dodgers and he would get injured there, he would
Yeah.
be absent for a while. That's why they had Gavin Lux, Chris Taylor, so that they could fill in that shortstop role. You even had people like Max Muncy and Justin Turner playing shortstop because Corey Seager, when he got injured, he would vanish. So and then you look at the Astros, like the Astros are like the competition. Now, again, I go back to Justin Verlander. He's also prone to injury, and he's not one to like shy away from that and back down from that. But you look at their offense, it's still pretty hot. They've been really well offensively, but I think it speaks volumes that they have been in second place in the AL West for the longest time, basically since the season began. I can't remember a time where the Astros were first in the AL West in 2023. So you look at a team like the Angels and in Shohei Ohtani's perspective, like, yes, it's reasonable to think that the Angels finally can make the playoffs. I mean, you've got Mike Trout, you've got Shohei Ohtani, you've got, all these other, like, not necessarily like underground players, but very much underrated players
Role
that
players. They just
deserve to
have role
stay. Yeah.
players. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, all the speculations about all these different players, like I think people just do it for like the hype of it all and for like the popularity of it all. Like, oh my God, imagine if Shohei Ohtani was in a White Sox jersey. Like,
It's
okay,
crazy.
yeah, that would be
It's
wild. But the
wild.
White Sox aren't gonna do that. I mean, you look at the whole situation between Dylan Cease and Lance Lynn and Joe Kelly. I mean, they got rid of Lance Lynn and Joe Kelly. They kept hold of Dylan Cease, but like they clearly don't know what they're doing. Tim Anderson hit his first home run of the year today. So he's like it looks like he's breaking down as he's rounding the bases, even though I know he's not, but genuinely looks
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
I was 17 the last time Tim Anderson hit a home run. I
Yeah,
was
no, it's
17 years
wild.
old. I'm 19 now. That's how bad this is.
No, yeah.
Absolutely horrendous. And I just feel like this whole trade deadline has been an absolute crapshoot. It has really given us MLB fans at least some sort of perspective as to the fact that there's nothing going on up here. It's all just, oh, I want this big name player because even if they get injured, I can sell all these jerseys and still get the money for it. And the amount of trades that went for no prospects, no draft, like nothing. It was just straight money. I mean,
Yeah.
you look at the Dodgers getting some money from the Mets getting some money from the Rockies. So, like all of
This is
these, like it doesn't make sense. It's so bad. It 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 just annoys me. It annoys me so much
Yeah,
because
I'll touch on these two things because the Otani thing I'll touch on first, and then second I'm gonna touch on these GMs because I genuinely think that these GMs like are really dumb. Like
yeah,
some of the GMs are good, but some of these GMs are just stupid as hell. So
yeah,
the Otani thing, it's like it's just so funny to me because the Angels, in my opinion, are just the most pathetic franchise in sports. Okay,
yeah.
they have Mike Trout and Shohei Otani, who are the two best baseball players in the world,
Mhm.
and they cannot make the playoffs. Okay. This year, they're a few games out of the wild card. I think they're 3 games, 2.5 games out of the wild card with 60 games left. And I respect they're trying to go for it because they know that Shohei Otani is going to leave in the offseason. Okay. But this is the time that you trade him. This is
Yeah.
when, if you're the Angels, you trade him. As I just talked about earlier with the Mets, they shouldn't have traded Scherzer and Verlander. They should have stuck it out until next year. This is the
Mhm.
time that if you're the Angels, you trade Shohei Otani. Okay, let's be
I
real
don't
with
know.
ourselves. Let's be real with ourselves. Are the Angels going to win the World Series this year?
Well, no,
No.
it's not about
But
that.
but
It's
are
not
the
about
Angels going
that.
to make the playoffs? Even if they keep Shohei Otani, are the Angels going to make the playoffs this year? No.
They could. They
They
could.
could. They could. See, this thing. They could. But will they? Will they genuinely make? Let's look at the standings right now. I think. Okay, so there's the 5 teams in the AL East: the Orioles, Rays, Blue Jays, Red Sox, and Yankees. Okay, they are all ahead of or basically tied with the Angels. Okay, the Angels have one more win than the Yankees, but they're basically tied. Okay,
Yeah, the
so
Yankees are going downhill. We can,
yeah, that's facts.
Angels
That's
have
facts.
surpassed the Yankees because the Yankees are
Yeah,
going down here. Angels
yeah,
are
the
going up.
Yankees are going downhill. So the Yankees are going downhill, and that's a different story. But if we look at it, the Rangers and Astros look like they're going to make the playoffs. The Orioles and Rays are going to make the playoffs. So that's 4. The fifth
Yeah.
team is going to be from the AL Central, so it's going to be either the Guardians or Twins. So that's 5. And then the sixth team is either going to be the Blue Jays, the Red Sox, the Yankees, the Angels, or the Mariners. The Mariners are going downhill right now. The Yankees are
Yeah.
going downhill. They have a lot of talent, but I would be
Mhm.
surprised if the Yankees fall out completely. I think they'll still stay in the playoff picture, but I'm not sure if they're going to make the
No, they'll
playoffs.
fall out. They'll fall out.
I
And
don't know.
then
I
you
think
want to talk about the other two teams. You said what? The Blue Jays and the Red Sox were the other
yeah,
two?
the Blue Jays and the Red Sox. The
Yeah.
Blue Jays are good. The Blue Jays are very good. The Blue Jays,
Mm.
I'm telling you, the Blue Jays are a very good team. They're very dangerous. If they make the playoffs with their like star players, I think that they could be very dangerous this year. And then, but let's say that the Angels made it as the 6th team in the playoffs. Let's say that
Yes.
a miracle happens and somehow the Blue Jays miss the playoffs and the Angels sneak in. Okay,
Yeah.
let's
Hmm.
say they sneak in. They would be the 6th seed in the playoffs.
Yeah.
They'd play the 3 seed, and the 3 seed would be the Twins. So fine, they could win that series because the Twins suck, or
Yeah.
they
I
suck.
mean,
So
both
fine,
Centrals.
you win that series, right? You go in the ALCS, you're facing either the Rangers, the Astros, the Orioles, or the Rays. The
Hmm.
Angels in a 7-game series have no shot to beat any of those teams besides maybe the Orioles or Rangers just because they're young and inexperienced. And if we be completely real
Hmm.
with ourselves, the ALCS, the Astros or the Rays are going to be in the ALCS. I'm willing to put
Yeah.
money. The Astros or the Rays will be in the ALCS. So
Yeah.
it's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. The Angels have no pitching. The Angels
Mm.
have no lineup and no pitching. Okay. The Angels have
Yes.
Shohei Otani, who's the best pitcher and best hitter in baseball. Mike
Yeah.
Trout is always hurt. Anthony Rendon has signed the second worst contract in MLB history, right behind Steven Strasburg. Okay. He
Yeah.
never plays. And the Angels lineup, literally, you see Matt Chapman on the Blue Jays yelling at his coach because he knows that the Angels' only hitter that can do any damage is Shohei Otani. He's like, why are you pitching him? No one else on the team can hit. So
Yeah.
I just don't see what the Angels are doing. Let's see if the Angels, what they should have done is
Hmm.
that they should have seen a year ago, 2 years ago, that Shohei Otani is the best player in baseball when he won the MVP that year, right? They could have traded him
Yeah.
that offseason. They could have gotten 3, 4, 5, like top of the line prospects. I'm not talking about like 50 to 100 range. I'm talking about like the best prospects of baseball, like Wander Franco level kind of guys, like
Yeah.
Adley Rutschman kind of guys. They could have got those kind of players, right? They
Hmm.
decided not to do that. They thought that with Shohei Ohtani, they can make the World Series, they can make the playoffs. They're not going to make the playoffs. They're not going to make the World Series. Then they're going to lose Shohei Ohtani for nothing. He's going to sign with the Mariners or Dodgers. And
Hmm.
then they basically just literally signed the best player in arguably in baseball, like one of the best players in baseball history. They signed him from Japan, lost him after 5 years for nothing. For nothing. They
Hmm.
never made the
Hmm.
playoffs. They never won anything. They're going to waste the entire career of Mike Trout. He's not going to win anything. He's played in
Yeah.
one playoff series in his career. In his career. I mean, the Angels are just a terribly run organization. And the reason that they never win is because they have never prioritized pitching. Okay. I can go through the Angels made the playoffs in 2014. Since 2014, I don't even know who their best pitcher is. I don't even know if they have their best pitcher, honestly, in the last 10 years was Dylan Bundy, and he's not even that good. Everyone was
Yeah.
hyping up Dylan Bundy when he had one good season for the Angels, and he can't do
Hmm.
anything. Shohei Ohtani is just carrying that franchise right now,
Yeah.
as in terms of ticket sales and in terms of the record. And they're just saying, you know what, screw it. We're gonna give him one last chance to make the playoffs. And if he makes the playoffs, great. If not, we're gonna lose him for nothing. I
Hmm.
felt like if you're the Angels, like let's say you can look at the Orioles. The Orioles would be interested in Shohei Ohtani. You could get the Orioles have a good farm system. You could probably get three top level prospects. Maybe like get some pitchers. I think like I forgot I might be mistaken, but like Grayson Rodriguez is like one of their best prospects. You could try to get a pitcher, and then let's say you trade Shohei Ohtani. You don't win this year. You're a terrible team anyway, but you get a frontline starter that could be in your rotation for the next 10 years. Then you win. You win that
Hmm.
trade. But they're just too stubborn. They want to. They are so nearsighted. They don't look in the future. That's why they haven't won for 10 years. It's just stunning. Like I just every time I talk about the Angels, it's just stunning to me. Like you look in the NFL, like I mean, it's not as much in the NFL, but you look in the NBA and like it's. I know baseball and basketball are different, but if you had the two best players in basketball, you'd make the playoffs every year. The fact that
Hmm.
this Angels team has the two best players in baseball and they're not even close to the playoffs most of the time, it says a lot. And it just shows that in baseball, you need a complete roster, and the Angels refuse to do what it takes to get a complete roster. And then as we talk about let's talk about the just the idiotic moves by some of these GMs. Okay. So the Marlins have done a great job this year. They've made some
Yeah.
super under the radar moves. They got Luisa Rise.
Yes. Hmm.
They just made some really smart moves that people thought in the offseason weren't that good, but they actually turned out to
Hmm.
be good moves. Okay.
And especially for where they're at. I mean, you
Yeah.
look at the wild card race, they're like what, fourth or fifth in that? And I mean, that's probably best case scenario in a division with, yes, I'll admit, a Braves team that is looking pretty decent right now. As much as I hate to say it, it's the truth. But yeah, I mean, like that like has to be best case scenario for the Miami
Yeah.
Marlins, and especially the front office in Miami when you're competing against teams, like the Phillies who were in the World Series last
They're
year
in the
and who have
toughest of
completely
yeah.
flopped.
They're in one of the toughest divisions in baseball, and they're hanging in the playoff picture right now with a team that does not deserve to be in the playoff picture. So they're doing a really good job. Luisa Rise is having a historic season, just hitting amazing. I mean, we're in a stage right now where there's four hitters in the MLB with an average over 300, and he has a 380 average. So it just shows how special of a player he is. Every team
Hmm.
needs a player like him, even though none of them have a player like him. But
Yeah.
what they did, I need to pull this up. They acquired Josh Bell and they traded away Gene Segura, which is fine. But they also traded away Khalil Watson, I think. I think that's his name. And
Hmm.
I think he was a first round pick 2 years ago.
Yeah, that sounds about
So
right.
so they traded away Khalil Watson and Gene Segura for Josh Bell. Josh Bell is he's a first baseman. He used to hit for some power. He's kind of struggled every year. He's like with the Nationals early last year, he was had a really good season. He got traded to the Padres, was terrible. This year he's kind of up and down. And then I just don't understand for the Marlins, like you're building for the future. This team should be ready to perform like 2 years from now, 3 years from now. You're trying to build for the
Hmm.
future. Why would you trade one of like a prospect that has a lot of promise, a lot of potential
Hmm.
for Josh Bell, who is not under contract for that long, is
Yeah.
always an up and down player, and he just doesn't have that much upside. Like you know what he is. He's going to be an up and down player, inconsistent player that occasionally will have a good stretch. I just don't
Hmm.
understand. Like that's a questionable move. The Mets trading away Scherzer and Verlander was a little questionable. and David Robertson. That was just a questionable series of events. The
Yeah.
Padres made sense what the Padres did because they needed to buy, they had to stay in it. But some of these moves, like the Mariners, like they traded away Seawald. I'm like the Mariners. Everyone was saying like early in the day that they were going to trade Teoscar Hernandez for sure, and I'm like give it a shot. Like what are you going to get that's that great for Teoscar Hernandez
Hmm.
instead of like I know the Mariners are like on the downhill, but like they could make the playoffs. They have just as good of a chance to make the playoffs as the Angels.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like it just doesn't make sense to me that the Angels are going all out getting Randall Grichuk, CJ Crone, all these super mid
Mhm.
guys, and then everyone's saying, "Oh, the Mariners should trade Teoscar Hernandez." Like, if anything, I trust the Mariners to make the playoffs more than the Angels, just because the Mariners have a deeper rotation. Like the Angels have no pitching at all
Yeah.
besides Ohtani. If Ohtani
Yeah.
gets hurt, their season's over. It's
Yeah.
one player boom or bust. For the Mariners,
Yeah.
they're having a terrible year. Everyone thought they were going to win the AL West, but
Hmm.
they have a chance. I'm not saying they're going to be dangerous, but like we saw last year, they were like 2 or 3 pitches away from beating the Astros in that series. It was a very close series. I know they got swept, but those games like switched like that. I mean, they were up and like so I think what happens when we head into the trade deadline, we see that teams get nervous and
Yeah.
they overcomplicate things, they overthink things. They don't stick to their principles, they don't stick to their roots, and they try to improve their team in the present instead of looking at the big picture. And I just feel
Hmm.
like they make nearsighted decisions that they don't really think through because they feel like if they make one trade, it's going to help them. Like it's not going to help you. Like one
Yeah.
individual tiny trade is very unlikely to help you. Yes, there's the occasional Josh Fields for Yordan Alvarez or Fernando Tatis from the White Sox to the Padres. Yes, that
Yeah.
could happen. But it's very rare that one individual trade for a middle of the pack team will just
Hmm.
drastically impact their chances. So I feel like teams get kind of tight, they get kind of nervous. They're like, we have to make a move to improve, and they end up
Yeah.
trading away some very valuable pieces,
Yeah.
or they sell before they should sell.
Yeah,
It,
especially for like a team like the Mets and like, even like you bringing up like Mariners and what could have potentially happened in Seattle. It's like
yeah,
I feel like the biggest problem is that these teams just give up like so easily. It's like,
yeah,
yeah, you're a little bit off from playoff contention in the wild card race, and odds are you won't make it because there are a lot of better teams than you. But
yeah,
wouldn't you rather like sit and like play that out? Because like the amount of players who are like second half athletes or like closer, like whatever you want to call it, like surely like you would want them there as like that concrete so that when, next year you're either barely above or below 500 and you need that extra push in order to either win the division or at least make it to the playoffs, like surely you would want those players that will win you the game later in the season. Because again, the whole thing about like the MLB season is way too long, and the same thing goes for the NBA. Like it should be shortened down because then
yeah.
these players will take the games a lot more seriously. Whereas when they don't take it seriously, these owners and these managers immediately go to, oh, we need to trade this player, we need to trade this person, we need to get this player instead because they're not doing what we paid them to do. And it's like, yes, like that might be the case now. Like they're not hitting home runs and they're not getting on base every single day right now. But once it actually matters and once it means something to them, that's when they will do it because it's all about like conserving their energy and making sure that they're not injured for the end of the year when playoffs
You
roll
can't go
around
all
because
out.
they want to be as healthy as possible. That's why
Yeah,
like, like one of the big problems and why this whole trade deadline has like, it's really turned so many stones for us as the MLB community. And one of those things is that this MLB season needs to be shortened down so that these players take the games a lot more seriously and so that they're not traded ever. Like there's a pitcher from Detroit that didn't opt out. He didn't
yeah.
opt to be traded because he
Eduardo
wanted to be with his
Rodriguez.
family. Yeah, he wanted
Yeah,
to be with his family. And like
yeah,
that makes sense. But like the Tigers were completely set on trading him and getting rid
yeah.
of him. But he didn't want to be traded for the family. And like that is where their mindset is at. Instead of being like, okay, there's this amount of time. I need to be focused on baseball. Let's play baseball. Whereas you look at, football players and you look at, like the training camps that are going on right now, like they are taking it religiously, seriously, whatever you want to call it, because it is a game a week. And sometimes you might even be waiting 2 weeks in order to play a game.
I
That's
also
what I
think
feel like this trade deadline has really taught us, and that like it's a case of them taking it just that tiny bit more seriously. Because, you think about, oh, I lost this game. That's okay. There are still 80 more games to be played out. Like, that's not what
Yeah.
the mindset should be. It should be like,
Yeah.
play every game like it's your last. And that's just not the case. It never has
It's
been.
just not how it's baseball. You have too many games to play like that. I mean, you're going to get injured and stuff. But I feel like also what you're saying, there's a big disconnect between the front offices and management of a team versus what the players think. And we've seen that with
Mm,
multiple teams. Let's look at the Tigers first. So they were trying to trade they were trying to trade Eduardo Rodriguez to the Dodgers because he's on an expiring contract. They want to get some value for him. They had a trade in place with the Dodgers, who were one of the 10 teams on his no trade list, and they still decided to go after that trade. They had a trade in place, and then he rejected the trade. So it's like, first of all, let's look at it. There's 20 other teams in baseball, 19 other teams in baseball you could trade him to, and you didn't try to explore those trades, but you instead explored a trade with one of the 10 teams that he had a no trade clause with. And then you didn't ask him beforehand, oh, do you want to go to the Dodgers? If we trade you to the Dodgers, will you go there? They never asked him that. They obviously didn't have dialogue. And then he ended up not getting traded. And now they don't get any value for him. He remains with the team. The Tigers are going nowhere. And then he's going to leave after the season. So they get no value for him. They can't improve the franchise. We look same thing with
yeah.
the Mets. The Mets were supposed to the Mets were supposed to be a great team. Let's say that they decided to sell, fine. They decided to sell. But
Mhm.
Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer both thought that they were ready to compete this year, even though they were having a bad season. And then they decided to trade David Robertson, and that just totally screwed the clubhouse. And
Yeah.
that disconnect between the general manager and the management of the team versus the
Hmm.
players, it was apparent, and it totally ruined their season because if they kept David Robertson, the biggest part about that is not keeping the player and the talent, it's the clubhouse. Because after you trade a piece like that is integral to the team, then your
Hmm.
star players start to bail on you. And that's what happened. Scherzer said, I'm out. Verlander's like, I'm out. And then they had no option. I mean, after you trade your closer, it ruins your whole bullpen. It changes the way that your team feels about their ability to compete. And then
Yeah.
at that point, if you're going to trade your closer, why not get value for the other guys? But it's just like the Mets, it just doesn't make sense. Like the Mets have a better chance to compete this year and win the World Series than the Angels do. And even though
Hmm.
they're 10 games worse or 5 games worse, but the Angels decided to buy and the Mets decided to sell. And it makes no sense. Like if we look at this in a playoff series, as bad as the Angels have been this, or as bad as the Mets have been the whole season, if they had Verlander, Scherzer coming out as the top two pitchers, you have a chance. But if you're
Yeah.
the Angels with Ohtani game one and then some no name game two, you don't have a shot. It's over. So like
Yeah.
I just feel like these teams, they don't understand the management. They don't talk to their players enough. They don't create a good enough relationship with the whole clubhouse. They rely on the
Hmm.
managers to do that, and then they make
Yeah.
a lot of moves that they think they basically treat the players just as numbers. They're like, okay, you're gone, you're in. It's like all transactions. They don't think of the players as like they don't take into apart team chemistry, any of that stuff, and that's a big deal because even you look at the Padres this year. The Padres most talented roster in baseball, have the best ERA in baseball, are
Hmm.
like on all the numbers, have the best numbers in baseball. But for some reason, they're 5 games under 500. So you'd be like, why? They have the best numbers. They're the best at everything. Why are they 5 games under 500? They're 0
Yeah.
and 10 in extra inning games. They're 6 and 18 in one run games. They have the worst clutch rating in baseball. And you look at that, what does that come down to? It comes down to grit, toughness, and culture. So as much as these general managers want to only focus on getting the best players and creating the best rosters, the most important thing is creating a team that has good players, but more importantly, having a cohesive unit that works together and they like
Yeah.
each other and they're willing
Hmm.
to work together and they want to win
Yeah.
and they have grit and toughness. That's what wins.
Yeah.
Not just
It,
some team that has the best player. I mean, if you named a team with just like the top 20 players in baseball, yeah, they might win games, but if they're not on the same page, they're not going to win. If they're on the same
mm,
pay'll win, but if they're not on the same page, they're not going to win anything.
mm.
So I
Yeah.
just feel like
It's like clash of egos, and
yeah,
this is also like a problem with like, a lot of NBA teams is that,
yeah,
you want like a power duo or like a power trio. And it's like, yeah, that's good and all having like two or three of the best players in the league. Yeah, like yeah, that makes sense. But at the end of the day, like if that player thinks that they're the best athlete on the court 10 out of 10 times, and then the person on the same team with them also thinks that instead of competing with the other team together, they'll just be competing with one another. And again, the Padres is a great example of that. I mean, you look at a guy like Manny Machado and you look at his career. Started off with the Orioles, and it was essentially him and Adam Jones as like his right hand man. but Adam Jones was always second behind Manny Machado. That was always the case. Then Manny Machado ends up getting traded to the Dodgers, where they go to the World Series, and he was like basically like not the reason why the Dodgers made it to the World Series
No, he
that year,
wasn't that.
but
That's the whole point. He wasn't the reason. He wasn't
he
actually
was he
that
was a
important.
big part in it. He
Yeah,
was a
no,
big part in it, but
he
he
was.
wasn't
He
he
was.
wasn't like the guy. But
No,
he thinks that he
he thought he
was.
was the guy, but he wasn't
Yes,
actually
exactly.
the reason. The Dodgers made the World Series that year not because Manny Machado was there, but in spite of Manny Machado being there. They made it because they
Yeah,
had a good roster, and then he was an additional piece that helped them. But he thought that he was the most important piece, and that if he wasn't there, they couldn't do anything. And then he
yeah.
left, and the Dodgers
Mhm.
have done better than the Padres in that range. So it's just like these players, like the culture means something. And like this is why I always say, in my opinion, I don't think the Padres are going to win with Manny Machado being their best player because he doesn't help your culture. He's not a good culture piece. Like I know
Mhm.
everyone says, "Oh, Manny Machado, they like Manny Machado, blah blah blah. He's a good player." He's not a good leader. He doesn't set a good example for your players.
Yeah,
When you're playing a game and Manny Machado strikes out and he throws his bat and he's pissed off and he's yelling at the umpire instead of taking accountability for any of his actions, it just doesn't set a good example for your young players. I mean, you have Fernando Tatis and you have like Juan Soto, Xander Bogaerts. You have all these talented guys, but when Manny Machado's up there whining and complaining at the umpire after one out of a
yeah.
game, it
Hmm.
doesn't set a good example. It sets a bad example for Fernando Tatis, who already has his own issues, and then
Yeah.
it makes it doesn't help your team if you go up there and you play with passion and you're trying to help your guys. I mean, it's just there's a different level to it. I mean, you see like players that win, like Derek Jeter. You look at the Astros players as much as people want to hate them. Alex Bregman, they're winners. They know how to win. They're
Hmm.
consistent. They show up to work every day. They do their job, and they're just total winners. And then you look at the Padres, and they have great personalities, but the only player on that team that actually is a winner is Juan Soto when he won with when he won with the Nationals. Xander Bogaerts won with the Red Sox, but
Yeah.
the guys, the main core pieces, Tatis and Machado for the Padres, they haven't won
Hmm.
anything. They haven't what
Yeah.
they don't have they didn't win anything. So it's kind of
Hmm.
hard to establish a culture when your two main guys are like not the most accomplished players, and then they don't set the best example for your players. Like I just don't.
And
It just
I would love to be in that Padres
yeah
clubhouse like every day because I even think to like a player like Matt Carpenter who has the experience and could easily like be like, hey guys, maybe we should do this. He's obviously not doing any of that. And
yeah
I feel like that like speaks volumes. Like obviously we don't know if it's a fact, but just like looking at it from an outside point of view, like it definitely looks like, like it's a lost cause. Like
yeah
there is just so much imbalance in the chemistry that goes on in San Diego that there's no point in like trying to fight it or try and like defend against it.
yeah
So
because
yeah.
that's what happens when you can't tell your when you look at Manny Machado. He comes across as the kind of guy that people don't want to criticize because he's just going to come back at them and he's not going to accept any of it. So like if you like criticize someone like Derek Jeter or like Alex Bregman and you start saying like you're making a mistake, they might get upset at you, but you know that if they know that they're making a mistake and they'll make an adjustment. Manny Machado just seems like too cocky and too arrogant to actually understand his shortcomings and to actually work to get better at those shortcomings. Like he just seems so cocky and arrogant in everything that he does, and he doesn't adjust at all. Like he just thinks that I'm the guy, I'm the shit, and I'm gonna come out there and I'm gonna be the best. And if something goes wrong, he doesn't look at himself. He's like, oh, it was someone else's fault. It was some other issue. This, that. Like
Hmm.
he doesn't take enough accountability. And that whole team, I mean, you said like with the Mets celebrating the World Series before the year started, the
Yeah.
Padres coming out before the season started saying, "Oh, we're gonna win the World Series. Who? It doesn't matter who we play. We're gonna win the World Series." And then you look at
Yeah.
last year, Dave Roberts coming out with the Dodgers saying, "We're gonna. I guarantee we're gonna win the World Series." Why
Yeah.
do that? Why put pressure on yourself when you know that you're not ready to handle the pressure? And there's no benefit to it. If you win the World Series, then okay, you won the World Series anyway. You should be happy with that. And then if you don't win, you look like an idiot.
Hmm.
So that you should just be focused. Teams should be focused on the process of getting better and putting consistent performances every day instead of just having these like players that are cocky, arrogant, and then will have a good performance here and there and might put up good numbers. But when it really comes to like crunch time and you really need them to perform, they don't perform. I mean, we look at last year, the Dodgers Padres, the Padres won that series. Why did they win that series? Trent Grisham had a good series. Jake Cronenworth had a good series. Jerks and
Yep.
Profar had a good series. Not because Manny Machado. Manny Machado didn't do anything. He had like a home run or two, And then whenever the bases were loaded, he would strike out. Like
Yeah.
it comes down to having gritty, tough players that come through in the clutch. And it just seems like teams like the Mets, the Padres, the Yankees, they don't have that. They just have a bunch of big name players that were super hyped coming into the year because they put they put up great numbers in the whole regular season. And then when it gets to the playoffs, they don't perform. And this year, they won't make the playoffs. I mean, the Padres might, but the Yankees and the Mets, it's looking like they're not going to make the playoffs. So it's just the whole thing is funny to me. I feel like just to recap is that the trade deadline is not as important as everyone makes it seem to be.
Yeah.
GMs are not on the same page with their teams, and they need to do a lot better job of getting on the same page with their team. And then
Yep.
just the last most important point is that teams that win have an identity and they have a culture. And it's not only about the star players, it's about having it's very strong culture. And I feel like a lot of teams just like to brush that off. They don't really think it's that important. They just want to ignore it, but it's very important. It's very underrated. So I think those are
Yeah.
my three main takeaways from the trade deadline this year. We'll see
Yeah.
what happens going forward,
Mhm.
but I feel like that's mainly it.
Yeah. I hated it. I didn't like it at all. There weren't really any like substantial trades that, because usually I feel like that's at least what I look out for is like, things that make me go, oh, like
The
I
surprise
never really,
ones.
yeah, like I never really thought about this player going to this team. All of
Yeah.
them didn't really make sense. And the ones that like did make sense, you could kind of see coming from like a mile away. And,
Yeah.
like
Like the
even
Orioles
then
needed a
it's,
starting pitcher, they got Jack
they got a
Flaherty.
starting pitcher. Yeah,
The
exactly.
Rangers needed a starting pitcher. They got Max Scherzer. The Astros wanted to get Justin Verlander back. They got Justin Verlander back. The
Yeah.
Dodgers wanted some pitching. They got Ryan Yarborough and Lance Lynn. Like nothing was like, oh, out of left field. I'm gonna get it just nothing surprising. Nothing that
I
really
just feel like everything is already set into like a hypothetical. Like, like had Shohei Ohtani been traded, the amount of people who'd be like, oh yeah, I said that, I called that, I knew it was gonna happen. Like if you were to get traded to like the Tigers tomorrow, there would be
yeah.
like a handful of people going, oh yeah, knew it. It's like you didn't though, but cool. It's just because, there's this narrative like, oh yeah, Shohei Ohtani could go to any team. And it's like, well, yeah, any player could go to any team, but you got to have the payroll for it. You really got to think about if it's really good for your team or not, because you could be a great player, but like again, talk about that chemistry, talk about the dynamic, like it could not be there. But that's gonna do it for our first episode back, episode 37. Again, make sure to follow us TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter, and make sure to watch the full episodes on YouTube and Spotify. We've got a lot of exciting things coming up. Obviously, we've got college football, we've got the NFL coming up, and boy, oh boy, do we love talking about those two things. So we've got those two things coming up. Possibly some in-person vlogs as well. So, we're not gonna hype anything up too much. We'll see what happens. We'll have the content for you guys. But yeah, that's gonna do it for us, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Deuces!